Good morning, guys. This is one, two, three things for this week, and I'm going to hit them pretty quick. The first thing is Louisiana flooding. If you've been able to siphon through some of the news about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and Ryan Lochte and Olympic swimmers, you'll know that there's been some pretty devastating flooding going on in Louisiana, especially in the Baton Rouge area. Just below the link to this video in your e-note this week, you're going to see that there's also a link to a video from the Vineyard Community Church of Baton Rouge that'll show you a little bit about what's going on down there. We're going to have two ways to give to Louisiana flood relief. Vineyard USA is partnering with Convoy of Hope, and we can give financially to them. One way you can do that, there'll be envelopes in the weekly this Sunday that will be labeled Vineyard Mercy, and so you can put checks or cash in there. Make sure that your check on your memo line, you write Vineyard Mercy. You can also give by text. For those of you who do text giving, you can even go ahead and do that today. Just make sure if you do that, that right after you enter the amount that you want to give, that you put just next to that disaster relief so that Melanie, our administrator, will know where to direct those funds. Again, just encourage you to take a look at that other video link from the Vineyard Community Church of Baton Rouge to get kind of an idea of what's going on down there and what they're facing. Thing number two has to do with the Busy series. Some of you asked me a couple of really good questions after church this past Sunday and throughout the week about, well, what does this mean about hard work? Are we supposed to work hard? Are we supposed to be diligent at those kinds of things? So we're going to talk about some of that in this series, especially in week 3 when we look at Mary and Martha and their story in the Gospel of Luke and sort of talk about the work-life balance. This Sunday, we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 15, and talking about sort of having a right understanding of time and how our understanding of time affects whether or not we'll be able to rest and we'll really be able to enjoy any of the life that God has given us. By the way, some of you will recognize Ecclesiastes chapter 3 more from an old folk song written by Pete Seeger called Turn, Turn, Turn. Those of you who like 60s music will know it because the Byrds also cut a version of that song in the 1960s. Anyway, the third thing number 3, I want to share with you this week is just a word about healing. You know, we have that ministry time each week at the end of our worship service, and stuff really does happen during that time. So just 2 quick stories about that. This past Sunday between worship services, I all of a sudden had a pain in my right hip. I hadn't had pain in my right hip prior to that. Didn't have it after the second worship service on Sunday. And so when I mentioned it to Pastor Brad, he reminded me that that could be the Lord having a word of healing for somebody else in the congregation who is having hip pain. And so I shared that at the end of the sermon, and I wanted you to know that a fella came up who had been having chronic hip pain, I think for several years, and was prayed for by one of our ministry teams and was able to report after that prayer time that for the first time in a long time, he had 0 pain in his hip. So stuff happens when we have that ministry time at the end of worship, and want to encourage you to be expecting that. A second story, a few weeks ago, we had a woman who was in church with us that was going to have her lower half, I believe, of her left leg amputated a couple days after worship. We had a team pray for her, of course, for healing, that she didn't have to have her leg amputated. Unfortunately, she did have to have her leg amputated. But when I went to see her at the hospital, she told me that Sunday, when our prayer ministers had prayed for her, she could, as they laid hands on the boot that she had to protect her wound, she could feel heat moving from their hands through her boot. And that for the first time in the 11 months since she had had her injury, she got through a 72-hour period without pain in her leg, and she wasn't able to take pain medication for that 72 hours prior to her surgery, which had been one of the things that our prayer ministers had prayed for her. And I just share these couple of stories with you because God is amazing. He's incredible. He moves in just these awesome ways, and he does that during our ministry time on Sundays. And we just always want to be cultivating an expectation that that ministry time is a time when God is going to do some of that amazing, incredible, awesome stuff to reveal his love for us. Anyway, that's one thing this week, Louisiana flooding. 2 things this week, the Busy series. And 3 things this week, expect God to move in awesome and incredible ways when we come into worship. Hey guys, I will see you in church on Sunday or around town before then. Have a good weekend.